I totally agreed with the comments that were made from the Center of Biological Diversity, that there needs to be more study done as to what offsetting the damage that will be done. Trees require water. Seedlings require water. They aren't just going to grow by themselves if they're not watered. Napa is in the midst of a drought, and we don't have sufficient water as it is. The water table at our ranch has dropped significantly in all the years we've been here.
If we don't stop cutting trees down, we'll have more fires, less water, less trees, less birds, less everything, and probably less wine. No water, no wine? Is that science?
In the friendly act of welcoming of Hall Winery for their pet project, I mean, I respect they worked hard to create something, but it seems like Napa County may be quietly getting stabbed in the back. It's just my perspective, perhaps. Is that an exaggeration? I hope so. How can anyone sincerely consider bulldozing off 14,000 healthy native trees anything other than quite a stab in the back?
My name's Theo Perez, and I want it known that I totally support the presentation that was made by the CBD in regards to the situation and the Walt Ranch and the proposed mitigation in regards to the oak trees. I do think that the math is very suspect. In fact, if you go by what is being included in the mitigation measures, there's no way there's going to be 80% success and survival in regards to the seedlings. Anybody who's had any experience around here and would know that that's going to be the case. It's actually going to be even more difficult in that with the situation of the drought that we're experiencing the last 2 years, if it continues, that's even going to be a difficult percentage to reach as far as survival would even be 17. Probably going to be more like around 10. If you were to consider those success rates in regards to the seedlings, you shouldn't be talking about a planting of over 16,000. You should be closer to 84,000 seedlings. And 200 trees per acre, if any of you can imagine what the acre size is in 200 trees, that's extremely dense. And the survival rate you should expect from such a planting would be minimal in regards to the success again. Again, considering the calculations that should be made in regards to replacing the 14,000 plus trees that are being removed and the carbon sequestration that's being lost. Again, by your own reports, it's over 105,000 metric tons. And again, if we're really taking an issue and trying to address greenhouse gas emissions, we should be talking about the total that is being lost, 105, not the replacement of 27,000 plus.
I wanted to talk about the problem of planting a bunch of saplings as a monoculture because I do not see the steps that are being taken towards restoring the biodiversity within that ecosystem. Anytime that you come in and put one crop down, it makes the whole area weak, and this makes it so it is more susceptible to fires. And also another problem that is created by the loss of these large trees is obviously that there is the loss of canopy. The canopy coverage has already been reduced drastically, and the last thing anyone needs is more canopy loss. And canopy loss can lead to the rising temperatures in the waters, which also contributes to the climate change. And I just wanted to say that from what I can see, there is not a guarantee that these trees are going to survive when they are planted again. And that is a risk that shouldn't be taken because these oak trees are a keystone species in the ecosystem. And the same way that people say, oh, well, where are the Wapos in Napa today? The local tribe that is here I don't want people to say, where are the oak trees? And I just think that that's something that's not being taken into consideration, is how this is going to have a devastating impact on the ecosystem.
The planet, our home, which includes the United States, is in the worst crisis in human history. Global warming-inspired climate change is neither a hoax or a joke, as some would have it. We, as a people and as a species, stand on a precipice created by us. And what each of us does or does not do today will determine the legacy we leave tomorrow for our children and grandchildren. In other words, it is a legacy of survival or betrayal. Killing 14,000 trees in the face of climate change is no hoax nor joke. It joins the disasters occurring in South America with massive clearing of rainforest and jungles. Add this to the massive wildfires of the last few years, also enhanced by climate change. California itself has already been hammered by mass destruction of carbon-sequestering forests. These latter, however, are disasters caused by an environment going wild because of climate change. The cutting of these trees represents a disaster that can be avoided. This is the chance for the Halls to claim a legacy as heroes by finding a way to repurpose their goals to save the trees that are so very important to sequestering atmospheric carbon. As we all understand, trees not only pull out CO2 from the atmosphere, it replenishes our gas of life, oxygen. Perhaps you've heard this before, but I would like to offer this quote. We must change almost everything in our current societies. The bigger your carbon footprint, the bigger your moral duty. The bigger your platform, the bigger your responsibility. Adults keep saying we owe it to the young people to give them hope. But I don't want your hope. I don't want you to be hopeful. I want you to panic. I want you to feel the fear I feel every day. And then I want you to act. I want you to act as you would in a crisis. I want you to act as if our house is on fire, because it is. 16-year-old Greta Thunberg, from her book, No One is Too Small to Make a Difference.
Our trees matter, and so do our creeks. But the thing that matters most of all is our nature. It affects our air, it affects where we live, it affects our fires, it affects our weather, and most of all, it also affects our temperatures. The more trees we chop down, the worse. The trees aren't worth wineries. They're worth much more. Or we need to appreciate them, and we need to treat them the way you would treat something special to you.
First off, I just want to quickly acknowledge that we're meeting on Wapo Anasatsi's land here in the county of Napa, and that the topic that we've been tasked with sticking to very narrowly is the GHG emissions plan in this the current phase of planning for the Walt Ranch project. But I just want to express that having a really narrowly defined focus for the public conversation and the discourse isn't necessarily helpful to coming to the best conclusion for our community. And I just want to call out that this is an active decision on the part of the people facilitating this discussion to constrain what we're able to discuss. And I just want to say that out loud so that we're all aware of it and we can consider for ourselves whether we think that's helpful or not. So I'm sure all of you are really familiar with these incredibly distressing looking graphs we see with global temperature change, right? GHG emissions are going up at this terrible rate. Global temperatures are going up at a terrible rate. And the thing that really represents that's meaningful to us is the amount of change that's going on in our climate system, the amount of energy that's present. And there's a lag between those greenhouse gases getting into the atmosphere and us experiencing impacts on the ground. And I really think one of the things that we, all of us, including me as humans, struggle with is to understand the dimension of time as it relates to our own futures in our lifespans and beyond. And so when we're thinking about planting trees, cutting down some trees today and planting some other trees today, we're thinking, okay, well, it's all kind of worked a certain way in the past. And according to how it's been for the last several thousand years, maybe this will work. But we don't have that kind of time left. The change that's happening in the environment is happening faster and faster. And as a scientist, it is beyond frustrating to see people not acting like we are in a crisis, because we are. We don't have time to be cutting down trees anymore. I'm sorry. There's no ceiling to this. And I'm sure you're all aware of the tornadoes that struck in Kentucky recently. We've had devastating fires here in Napa County, increasing severity of floods. You know, there's just this ratcheting up that we're experiencing every day. And I think my main message for you is that just doesn't stop somewhere. And we can't base our future planning on the kinds of assumptions that we've been using all the time that it took us to get here.
The phony mitigation plan of planting seedlings does not provide any significant sequestration potential until those seedlings have matured, a process that takes decades. Why throw away all the growth of these mature trees for a monocrop that will reduce soil quality? The vineyards will also be ripped out and burned at the end of their time, meaning the minimal sequestration from the vineyard will be undone as the carbon is re-released with fire. Prioritizing the wine industry for the benefit of tourists is not okay with the citizens of Napa who live here year-round. We don't need another winery to deforest our county and disrupt our ecosystem's natural processes. Board of Supervisors, please do better to serve the residents of Napa County.
It takes about 375 gallons of water to produce 1 bottle of wine. Therefore, it defies logic that this board continues to approve new groundwater-sucking vineyards. You cannot continue business as usual and deny that climate is changing or that we will have plenty of water to spare. The 14,000 plus trees the Halls intend to chop and burn are the direct result of a lack of a cohesive oak protection policy to prevent vineyard conversion projects such as Walt from wanton destruction of our oak woodland forests and watersheds. Instead, Napa County relies on weak mitigation strategies designed to save applicants money, but at what cost? Replacing grown oak trees with seedlings is not the answer.
The kicker here is that we don't know who's going to hold the conservation easement. Thank God, in the wording of mitigation 6.1, the holder of conservation easement will be a accredited land trust organization. Your wording. Good. You look up accredited land trust organization. So far, so good. But most of these land trust organizations are defending property that is gifted, where they get a IRS deduction on that, not where it's required. There's no schedule on inspection. There's no actual location. And why would somebody like the Napa Land Trust take the easement?
When it comes to planting as a mitigation, we understand now there's no longer time to build back capacity for carbon drawdown by planting seedlings. And it took 8 years altogether for volunteers, mostly school children, to plant these. And they found that for this 8-year planting effort, they got CO2 sequestered less than 1 old oak in its first 100 years of life.
You are in a position of power, incredible positioning in time, where you could make an action to stop the madness that is going on, where this county is clear-cutting trees by the thousands, year after year after year, then 14,000 for Walt. You could pass a moratorium on all development except for de minimis use and get all these matters straightened out and give our kids a chance to live on a planet that isn't so dangerous. Everybody has to step up. Everybody has to do something. And when you're in a position of power like this, we are asking you to take seriously climate change. We still have a climate action plan that hasn't been passed. We're still cutting trees, and we're not paying attention to depleting groundwater. So if you pass a moratorium, you could take the time to put everything right and give the kids who come after us a chance to live on a planet that doesn't kill them.
We have watched so much land already lost for the purpose that is not serving a higher good. This is a turning point. Do you wish to leave a legacy of selfishness, or turn now to your higher self and higher purpose and take the step of turning the tide? To you supervisors, have courage. Don't be afraid to be the only one voting for the right thing. Brad, kids have planted many acorns on the Acorns to Oaks effort. I guess you know, this many years later, the trees that survived hardly equal one mature oak tree. You were sincere in your effort. This is your chance to acknowledge that such efforts are false mitigation. Brad and Diane, you no longer need to be afraid of losing campaign donations. You especially can have courage to follow your heart.
At every education level, including adult, they will learn about changes in our weather and what trees do to help us in ways that you've heard of, including homes for animals and wild creatures and putting oxygen in the atmosphere. Will you tell your children you said it was okay to kill 14,000 trees? Who has the courage to say no to this project? Which ones of you will vote on behalf of all county residents and our future by saying no to Walt Ranch?
I appreciate that each of the supervisors disclosed meetings they had with various individuals concerning this project. However, in the interest of full disclosure, it would be helpful if the supervisors also revealed the amount of campaign contributions they have received and accepted from the proponents of this project. For example, according to filings made with the FPPC, Supervisor Pedroza has accepted some $32,500 in campaign contributions over the past 5 years from either Craig or Kathryn Hall, the proprietors of Walt Ranch, or Hall Wines. $12,500 for his 2016 campaign, $10,000 in 2018 when there was no campaign, and $15,000 in 2019 for his 2020 campaign. Supervisor Ryan Gregory accepted $10,000 from the Halls, and Supervisor Ramos also has received campaign contributions in excess of $5,000 from the Halls. I and many members of the community see this as a very clear conflict of interest, and as such, Alfredo Pedroza, the member in receipt of the majority of the campaign contributions from the Halls, should recuse himself from this proceeding. Going forward, I think that all members of the Board of Supervisors should reveal the exact amount of any campaign contributions made by any party who comes before this board with an appeal or request for consideration to prevent the appearance of any impropriety.
Kelly,
Good
go ahead.
afternoon, Supervisors. Kellie Anderson, Angwin. I have to bring your attention to the fact that we started this process in 2016, your public hearing process on the Walt Ranch. You will all agree we live in an incredibly changed, dangerous, accelerating world. The world under which David Morrison, for the first time ever, opened public hearing for a vineyard project it is just drastically changed. You cannot ignore where we are today. The greenhouse emission plan, as proposed, is simply inadequate to offset the removal of the 14,000 trees. How will follow-up monitoring be conducted? I find follow-up monitoring on other projects to be just woefully inadequate. I mean, for God's sake, look at Bremer. Look how far off the rails things go before any attention is brought to the failure of mitigation measures. And lastly, and I think this is very important, who would hold a conservation easement for this property? Or are you willing to simply accept a deed restriction? And I must quote, as best I can, planner Brian Bardona's comment, and this is verbatim: no one wants these lands after the clearing. The biological damage has been done. So unless you have Land Trust or a similar organization standing in line right now, I defy you to find any conservation organization who's willing to take that property. Now, Mr. Morrison has relied on consultants and their opinions to say that these mitigation measures will compensate for the loss of those 14,000 trees. But this is not a local issue. This is a global issue to which your decision today will contribute to continued destruction or potentially help slow the destruction.